Let's see. I'm reading here about Displacer Beasts, that they can appear in multiple places at once. And what is the best way to discover where they are? Why, it's to listen to the Bestiary.
All right, everybody. Hello and welcome back to Alignment May Vary for the Bestiary podcast. We are back with Jonathan. Say hello.
Hello, Jonathan here.
Kayvon.
Hello.
And Tyler.
Hello.
Awesome. So today we're here to talk about Displacer Beasts, which I got to pick this time around. So I figured I'd launch our question with what is a Displacer Beast?
To answer that question, I'm actually going to turn to a wonderful description I found of the Displacer Beast in a 4th edition adventure called the Madness at Gardmore Abbey. It's a pretty famous adventure. Maybe we'll talk about it later. But it has a very nice description of a Displacer Beast. So I'll read this out. They're chasing somebody in this. A pale, slender figure with long silver hair flees through the dark grove, her desperate footfalls making hardly a whisper. Behind her and to either side, 2 feline monsters pursue her in eerie silence towards a ruined bell tower. Their black, 6-legged forms are hard to focus on clearly. Spiny tentacles whip forward from the back of one of the beasts and lash the fleeing figure, who drops with an agonized shriek. A rustling at the top of the tower signals a nest of sturges awakened to the scent of blood, while on the ground, the tentacled beasts move in for the kill. And the tentacle beasts in this case are the Displacer Beasts, 6-legged cat-like creatures that look like panthers with these 2 huge tentacles just kind of whipping out from behind their head. They're named for their unusual ability to appear in multiple places at once, which makes them generally hard to hit. Harder in some editions than others, which we'll talk about at some point, I'm sure. And they're vicious hunters. So
clarification: it's not multiple places at once. It's that they're able to shift their position
up to 3 feet.
Well, the one you see.
Bend light. That's right.
Yeah, the one you see is just not where they actually are.
That's actually a good clarification. In my mind, I always picture them a little bit as like phasey, but it's true in the real description. It's there in one place that's not actually where they are. That's a good point.
Visually, I think I like them more as sort of a phase beast.
A phase beast, yeah. It's just what Displacer kind of seems to feel like to me. A
force field or something flickery.
That's always how I pictured it. But I guess you're right. If you actually read the description, it's literally like they bend light, they look over there.
Yeah.
So
mirror image or something.
Does anybody have to add to that description, or should we get on to our questions?
You pretty much nailed it.
Bluish, blackish, purplish colors.
All of the above, although mostly a sleek black creature. And Morganite, why did you choose the Displacer Beast?
Right. I was waffling between a couple, but this one in particular intrigued me because I actually got to play as a druid who could transform into a Displacer Beast in our campaign recently. So I know how to fight as one, but I don't know anything about them in the lore.
I kind of love that. You're like, I know what this is because I've been in its body, but I know nothing about it.
Pretty much.
You were like a pretender. You were pretending to be a Displacer
body
beast.
snatcher.
As I was researching, I thought it was interesting that character, the 2 transformations that she got, the Blink Dog and the Displacer Beast, like. Researching this, I came to understand there was a really unique set of transformations that she got.
Yeah, because they hate each other.
Well, but they're also not beasts, and druids can traditionally only turn into beasts. So this was a special creature that I got permission to use because of my specific.
Wait, Displacer Beast isn't a beast?
No, it's a monstrosity.
And it's actually, this even gets into some real nerdism here, because fans have argued over the fact that it should be technically a fey monstrosity.
It should be at least as of 5th edition, it should be a famous monstrosity.
The origins of the Displacer Beast were a mystery for a long time, and unlike the owlbear which when we covered that, or some of the other creatures we've covered, where it's sort of like the origins were given and then sort of adjusted over time, or like the Behir, how we talked about where they came from, it kind of got more and more specific as time went on. The Displacer Beast was left a total mystery until 5th edition as to where they came from.
Well, Stalker brings up a good question. Hi, Stalker, by the way. What is the difference between a monstrosity and the beast for people who don't know the difference?
Yeah, exactly. What is the difference?
That's a good D&D question. So it's all about, in Dungeons & Dragons, monsters, creatures have types. So you, for instance, have humanoids, beasts, monstrosities, devils, and it really doesn't do anything except describe their very, very broad species and give you something to work with as sort of a keyword. Like how in Magic the Gathering, some cards, it's like, this only works on monstrosities. That's metagame. That's what it is. It's just a designator, like a hashtag monstrosity. As far as what literally it describes biologically, it's a huge, wide category. If you look through the book, it's hard to tell really what
magic isn't the differentiating factor. Like there are other magical
usually
creatures
about
that are just beasts.
It's usually about where they came from.
Okay,
like devils or fiends come from the fiendish planes. Beasts are natural beasts, and monstrosities are unnatural beasts. They have some sort of unnatural heritage.
Which would make sense for a Fey beast.
For a Fey beast, yeah. Right. Which is why I'm okay with the monstrosity as a designator, and I don't mind that it's
still called Displacer Beast.
Well, that they don't go into the Fey aspect of it. That's what I was going to say. Though you bring up a good point. It's a Displacer Beast, not a Displacer monstrosity. You've ruined everything. You've twisted this all back in on itself.
Well, and also the beast classification, by and large, I haven't found a lot of things that are classified as beasts that aren't just normal animals.
Like a giant ant. Is that considered a...
That's a beast.
That's a monstrosity.
That's not a monstrosity? I thought that was a beast.
Is a giant ant would be a monstrosity, wouldn't it?
So.
Well, technically it's an insect.
Okay, we'll save that for a later session,
I'm going to look up giant spiders right now.
No. Stay on topic.
Cut it from the podcast later.
So, anyway, go ahead. What is your question?
So where exactly do they come from, and what are their general habits were you to bump into them into the wild? Like, will you bump into them in the wild, or are they beholden to a wizard that summons them, how do they work?
So their in-game origin is in the Fey wilds, millennia and millennia ago, or some number of time ago. The Unseelie courts captured them and tamed them to hunt unicorns and other magical, wondrous animals. They would use them to take down, fanciful, wonderful creatures. But the Displacer Beasts are smart and terrible and evil, so they broke free and just kind of ran amok until the Seelie court hounded them out of the Fae with blink dogs, which is one of the explanations given for why blink dogs and Displacer Beasts hate each other.
And I want to say, again, going back to the earlier point, of these, this was a mystery for a long time. It was kind of cool in early editions of D&D. These have long been iconic creatures, and you would read about them, and the origins were just sort of left a mystery. So figuring out in Dungeons and Dragons 5, them finally revealing this long, the reason behind this long-standing feud between the Displacer Beasts and Blink Dogs. I mean, let me be frank about this. There were articles written about this. There were articles written from the perspective of in-game characters being like, why do Blink Dogs hate Displacer Beasts? People.
Well, and I think those articles have a valid point because they explain the scientific experiments that they used to determine their hatred for each other. There's a biological component to it, sort of biological, I guess. Teleportation and displacement don't do well with each other.
Yeah, apparently it really creates a physical discomfort in the two animals. But I love the fact that you had these in-game characters writing these serious, scholarly articles. And then you suddenly, the reason is given and it's something unrelated to all that. It's this other reason, this other history, this other lore. It doesn't erase at all the in-game fascination with the creatures, but it makes kind of the players a part of that mystery.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the gems of like early Dungeons and Dragons lore is that a lot of what you know about the monsters is from journals that are discovered in the woods, or like people that have been researchers that have been mauled after doing their studies, and all you have left is sort of like their research notes, which is what like they publish in order to tell the story of the creature. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, there was I think in early Dungeons and Dragons there was a lot of attention given to this idea that players were accessing a world that was out there. Like when you had a monsters manual in your hand, it was an actual artifact of that world in some ways. And they tried to do as much as possible to sort of differentiate the stats from the creatures, which is super cool. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it gives it like a breath of life, which is why, we're sitting around talking about them right now.
Yeah. It's why I have one in my backyard right now.
Yeah.
You don't have a backyard. B, please don't ever show me. Yes.
A tiny one.
You made that shit up. You don't have a backyard.
As to where you would find them in the wild, the answer is kind of anywhere that's wild. They will go. They don't like to be around other living creatures because they hate them and they want them all to die. So they will find, mountainous area, swamps, even desert. It doesn't matter as long as it's an incredibly wild area.
Well, that's interesting because I did see that they are apparently pack hunters.
Yes.
So they don't like other creatures other than themselves, but they're okay with each other then.
Yes.
Yeah, they have small packs. It was 4 to 6, I think, is what I was seeing.
4 to 6. Yeah.
There's a specific note given in Dragon 109, which has the ecology of the Displacer Beast, and also one of my favorite covers of all time. But that's a tangent. But no, seriously, it is this dude just about to get wrecked by a Yeti. It's pretty great.
It's pretty delightful.
We'll have an entire episode on that. Don't worry.
But there is a whole thing in there about how the Displacer Beast, how it pretty much will attack every other animal except for its own kind. Like they don't know why, but I think there's plenty of examples in nature of species just biologically inherently understanding you don't kill your own kind. So I think that's just part of their nature.
And they are exceedingly vicious. Even when they are well fed, if they see something to hunt, they'll hunt it for sport. Like they don't like living creatures and they will do what they can to murder them.
Yeah, there's some debate over their alignment, right? Like they're neutral and fey, but they're potentially like lawful evil.
They've long been. I mean, one of the things we're gonna have to talk about at some point is how the evolution of this creature through the editions, because it's one that has really gone through some. While the ideas remain the same, they've changed some really interesting parts of this creature. But I don't know if we're ready to get into that yet. It's kind of. I don't want to steal the show from Morganite here. I did have a question for Morganite related to your question.
Yes.
A question about your
Yes.
question.
Okay.
When you asked about the origin of the creature, do you also mean the real life origin?
Yeah.
Because that's an interesting story. I think.
No, that I was genuinely curious where they came up with the idea for it.
Tyler's got this one, I think.
This is a story that I think I've always really enjoyed. It shows kind of the breadth to which they looked for creatures in the early days, because it's an old creature. It appeared in the first D&D supplement, the Greyhawk supplement, that distinguished D&D from just being kind of extra rules to add on to an old war game called Chainmail, into more of the game that we know now. Gary took it from the creature called the Quirrell.
Oh.
Yeah, you know it from Final Fantasy.
I just made that connection.
You know it from Final Fantasy.
Oh, yep.
It comes from a short story that was later adapted into a full novel by A.E. Van Vogt called The Black Destroyer from the July 1939 issue of Astounding. That story and that issue were considered the launching of the golden age of science fiction. So it's clear that, this is Gary loving some crazy creature from Pulp Fiction days, Like, I want to fight one of these things. How would I fight a Quirrell? What would that look like in Greyhawk?
Well, it's also Gary Gygax's sort of clever way of making a world where people have to love the things he loves, because it's a world populated by creatures that he loves. Like,
yes,
I mean, Dungeons and Dragons, we don't really talk about this a lot, but in our podcasts so far, but really it is one of the major reasons that things like Lovecraft and these old science fiction stories like are still known today, because those creatures were given second life, infinite number of lives when they were put in these games and handed to players to say, do with them what you will, like use them, build them, create entire stories and adventures around them. So, you know, if Gary liked a creature from an old science fiction short story, this was his way of honoring that.
Fun fact about that story as well. The author ended up suing the studio who produced Alien because of its similarities, and won a settlement out of it. Not won, but, you know, settled out of court because of the similarities.
We'll talk about that for a minute, because the similarities are what? Like, what's the story?
So,
like, how's
Black
the story
Destroyer is from the perspective of the Quirrell, and it's a research ship lands on a planet with only these creatures on it. It calls it the id, but it's phosphorus. It ate phosphorus out of their bodies. So it eats a couple of the crew members, and they freak out and go back on the ship. And it kind of goes back on the ship, and it becomes this kind of cat and mouse game between the crew and the creature.
Now, Morganite, you when Tyler said Quirrell, you were like, "Oh man, was that because of Final Fantasy?"
I hadn't made the connection between the creature in Final Fantasy and this one, even though they're both cats with whip tentacles, essentially. But the Final Fantasy versions, they're usually like the tentacles are like their whiskers on their face or something. It's always like in a weird place. So yeah, I recently got completely decimated by running into one of those way underleveled, and it just murdered my entire party. And I was like, nope, okay. Mistake.
I know this isn't a Final Fantasy podcast, but you know, they are remembered in Final Fantasy for a couple big reasons. One is they were very deadly. They had an attack called Blaster, which could reduce you to like 1 HP or even kill you outright. There was a palette swap that was called Kate Shi, long before Kate Shi became the iconic character from Final Fantasy VII.
Well,
but
speaking of abilities, what abilities does the Displacer Beast have in combat, other than the ability to displace itself, essentially?
So this might be a good time to go back a little bit and talk about the different editions, unless anybody else has something to add real quick.
No, you got something to go for it.
I think we got to start by saying the Displacer Beast is literally one of the most iconic creatures of the Dungeons and Dragons universe. As Kayvon pointed out, it shows up in 1975. That's its first appearance in the Greyhawk supplement. It's one of the only creatures to be featured on a cover of the Monstrous Compendium in second edition. And I mean, it's literally standing next to the Beholder. So just to give you a sense, like this is really a creature that is a cover boy for Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, it's right there. They've changed. It's interesting to mark them through the ages. So your first edition Displacer Beast is a very its power is kind of gives us the base of what its powers will always be. So it has this ability to create itself 3 feet for either left, right, ahead, or behind from its actual position. And is that something that they do in the short story too, Tyler?
So in the short story, they can manipulate like electronic vibrations and waves and stuff. So it uses it more like it can like phase through walls and stuff like that and like fuck with computers.
Okay.
Obviously there weren't any computers to fuck with. So I think he took
just players.
He took that idea and created that neat little like oh, here's a creature that you think you're fighting here, but actually it's been behind you the entire time.
Okay, so he kind of makes the scare factor out of this aspect of it. And this actually leads to what becomes so difficult in design for the Displacer Beast, because this aspect of this disappearing act, or this sort of light bending act, is what keeps sort of changing. It's like they're not quite sure the best way to represent it. And how powerful the Displacer Beast is sort of depends on how they interpret this attack. So in the first edition, creatures, got to understand, in the first edition are very kind of nebulous. First of all, damage is not nearly as like crazy as it is these days. Like the Displacer Beast actually does more damage than Asmodeus, the leader of Hell, on an attack by attack basis. The leader of Hell has way more powers and he's way harder to hit than the Displacer Beast, but like he's going to survive longer. But still, just to keep it in mind, like damage amounts are kind of wonky in first edition. By the time we get to second edition, and I've got a picture of how it kind of evolved here.
Oh, they kind of got rid of a bit more of the monster. It's just the weird tentacle things and the extra legs.
Yeah, it looks almost cuddly.
It does.
Like
it's soft.
this thing's like fuzzy and soft. Yeah, it's Bagheera on crack. Like it's Bagheera on acid.
There you go.
The second edition sort of starts to lock in. It just kind of takes what happened in first edition and goes just a little bit further with it. At this point, the dungeon master can roll a d10, and that kind of determines where it really is. It kind of goes a little bit more into the ability being magical. This is also where the ecology article comes out, which I know you read, Kayvon.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk a bit about where they come, like how it actually creates the illusion, what they say in the article?
Yeah, they say it's like they go into like the science of it. It's like some molecular vibration that's happening on like the outer layers of their skin, and then that somehow creates the refraction of their image into like a space.
Yeah, so it's like
away.
Quick vibration.
Yeah, it's
basically.
quick vibrations. Yeah,
and your eye doesn't catch it.
It's a vibration thing. Yeah, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah,
and
it's cool.
Also, they describe their fur as having like a natural gloss or sheen, which might play into how they're able to do it. But
yeah, and this is really standard for second edition, where they'll take what happened in first edition and expand it into like the genetics behind everything. Because they also go into the tentacles there too. They expand on the tentacles. Like they don't appear right until they're a little bit older.
Yeah, they don't have them as cubs. They grow out of their back as the cub matures over
interesting.
Like a 2-year period.
It's also where they lock them in, as the first edition just sort of treats them like these weird cat creatures, but the second edition talks about how the tentacles are their preferred form of attack, and they don't actually like using their claws and their teeth. The tentacles allow them to sit back and strike from a distance while keeping their general body safe.
Yeah.
And they use their 6 legs more for speed rather than mauling. Then we get into third edition, which is like the big daddy of these things. Weirdly, the design changes to this like starved.
Oh, yeah. It's emaciated now.
Yeah, they become emaciated.
Oh, is that the creepy looking one?
Creepy looking one from third edition. They become emaciated. They become
it's almost undead looking.
Yeah, almost
yeah.
Right. It looks like something out of like Pet Cemetery.
Yeah, for sure.
And they went definitely for a more horror route. And that fits because they become really horrible creatures. And I mean that in a respectful way. That their ability to displace becomes completely better. It's like on the first hit, you have a 50% chance of missing entirely, just regardless. And then if you succeed past that first hit, you still have a chance of missing and hitting the illusion instead. And you take penalties to your attack and all that. Like they become very hard to hit. And it makes them frightening because they can get close in combat. And, your barbarian characters, your fighter characters who are good at just dealing this close range damage, they're just kind of left, whacking at nothing. And they even add in a version called the Beast Pack Lord, which is ungodly.
Is it huge, right?
It goes from 51 health points to 203 health points.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And it grows like double the size. I want to say they grow up
Why
to like
didn't I
20
have
feet
gotten
in
that
length.
transformation?
Yeah, Tyler's right. It's 20 feet in length and 10 feet high. And I didn't, if you ever go back and look at pictures of third edition, they really go with this emaciated look. It's crazy. If you look in the Monster Manual, it's like upsetting to look at. And then we get to fourth edition. And fourth edition kind of continues on the tradition of third edition to the point where I don't really need to go into much more detail about it. But there is an oddity. I think it's in fourth edition where they learn common.
They give the Displacer Beast the ability to speak.
What's its intelligence level?
I think third
Is it
edition gave it.
that they get common?
Yeah, and I think fourth edition, the weird change was they switched its alignment from evil to neutral.
Oh, I know that for sure. That they make it neutral for some reason. I think that was just because they thought of general creatures as being more neutral because it's not a real thinking creature.
Yeah.
It's just a primal instinct creature, which does kind of beg the question of, is it evil? That it is a good alignment question.
Well, that they are clever. They are intelligent creatures.
Are they?
They'll lay
their
ambushes.
intelligence is 6.
They say they're more intelligent than a
just
common cat, but they don't really give them much more beyond that.
Well, but
no, it's more they're intelligent when it comes to like how they choose to
a common
hunt
cat can stalk and hunt birds and small prey animals, no problem. So
I think Tyler, the point that he's maybe making, correct me if I'm wrong, is that they'll actually torture creatures. They'll actually torture them, and they like them to run and be afraid. So that does belie, if not real intelligence, at least a certain cruel, evil intelligence.
Yeah, it says that they're not smart enough to plan strategies or create long-term menaces.
Right.
They're extraordinarily intelligent and ferocious hunting animals.
So in the hunt, they just have this natural instincts. So it is weird though. At some point in third or fourth edition, they get the ability to speak, and they speak common, it just is weird. I haven't actually met another DM who really liked this because they're not the kind of creature you can picture like bartering with for your life. Like they want to torture and kill you.
It would just be cruel, evil taunts the whole time that they're trying to attack you. Which
even that sort of takes away from their alien nature.
Yeah.
Also, how do you give something a neutral alignment and say it's because they're an animal, but then give them the ability to speak?
Right? And it doesn't flow very well. So then we come to fifth edition, and I'll put up the picture for that. By fifth edition, you've left the emaciation behind. And you've gone back to just a really beefed up version of the original. This really perfectly muscled, chiseled, sleek animal.
It's a cat on steroids at this point.
Cat on steroids, yeah. Yeah, it does. It looks like something out of like the Gargoyles cartoon.
Yeah, kind of. Oh, that's spot on. Yep.
And here's where the ability that they get is maybe one of the only kind of my regrets about this creature. I mean, not personally, I didn't build it, but I'm sad that they didn't kind of leave it a little more beefed up. Its displacement ability just gives you disadvantage on all attacks. The problem with this is that two things. One, there's a lot of ways to remove a disadvantage in Dungeons and Dragons. You can flank. If you're using those rules, you can use a lot of spells. There's, you can just say like, I described something really cool. And the DM says, well, you get advantage on this as strike, which to me doesn't really address directly how they are displacing light. It just is like, oh, it's kind of hard to hit them. That doesn't really capture the ability to me. In addition, their AC is only 13. Yeah. That's their armor class. That's what you have to roll to hit them. Keep in mind that most first level characters have at least a +4 to every hit, if not +6 or +7, meaning you have to roll a 8 or 9 to hit these things. You're going to do that more than half the time. So even with disadvantage, it doesn't lead you to feel like you can't hit these things.
Yeah. The automatic miss that they got rid of, which you understand for simplification, they went this route, but it definitely does take away from sort of the threat of the creature.
Yeah, I feel like now with new releases of Dungeons & Dragons 5 material, they're getting back into some of these more complicated ideas. You'll see creatures that are like roll a percentile die, you have a 50% chance of missing. I feel like in the original Monster Manual for 5, they were really careful. They're like anything That's too complicated. Just cut it. Make it simple. And I think that, unfortunately, that design has hurt the Displacer Beast because they're beefy in terms of their hit points. They've got 83 hit points, 85 hit points, actually, which is good. That's a lot. And so a horde of these is still going to be pretty scary. But you kind of lose some of the flavor. You lose some of the flavor.
Yeah, as somebody who actually played as one, I will definitely agree that like they seemed a lot cooler than it actually was to play, because I think our first fight that I used the Displacer Beast transformation was against actually owlbears. Am I mistaken in that, Tyler? I think it was actually against 2 owlbears.
I think it might have been, yeah. Because it was forest times.
And I tore the owlbear to shreds, no problem. But we were also in a party, and it was a big monster. It couldn't throw me off, that kind of thing. But then the next time I used it, the next like 2 times I used it, I basically only used it for the extra hit point pool because I got massacred in that form so fast. And I was like, what?
Yeah, you even with your disadvantage, you were getting hit almost immediately. Yep. And then
yeah, I mean, to be fair, I'm not surprised. I mean, if you pit an owlbear against a Displacer Beast, that's for our other podcast, the arena, where we take our creatures and we just shove them against each other and take bets from the audience. That's actually not a bad idea.
We have to do it.
It's not a bad idea. It's good. Man, we'll create a new gambling game.
It really would be fun.
Oh my God. We'll all have to play different monsters and go into the pit.
We'll call it the den.
Yeah.
Okay, keep in mind, that's a good, idea. No one can steal it, copyrighted.
Yeah.
We have proof in this podcast, but like, get ready for the podcast, The Den, where we each take a monster that we've discussed and fight against each other in an arena for money. There you go. That's great.
That's gonna be really unfortunate with 3 people have a CR, 5, 6, 7, and then somebody drops like a higher demon or something. Yeah.
We would find anyway.
Yeah, alliances will form in the den.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
Alliances may vary.
Yeah.
In the
alliances may vary.
Alliances may vary.
I will say I do think a Displacer Beast in world could tear the shit out of an owlbear. And I mean, these things killed Pegasus.
Yeah.
I do still feel that they should buff back the Displacer ability, and then I think it would be more on an even playing field with everything else of its CR rating. But otherwise, yes. It's a cool monster.
Yeah, it just comes down to, as a GM, like, there's some rules that are just rules. And then there's rules that you actually go like, wow, that makes me think about this creature. We talked about this a little bit with the unicorn a couple weeks ago when we talked about how in second edition, there was this rule that, like, if you were in a forest and you were a ranger, there was a 10% chance that, like, the forest had been marked by a unicorn and you would recognize it and find unicorns. And, like, again, is that a super necessary rule to play the game? No. But it's a rule that tells you about the world. Yeah. And it makes you think about the creature. And like the Displacer Beast, when you put this thing in, it's like 50% mischance. It really makes you think about that creature. You just read that and you're like, oh God, this thing is, he does something with illusions or something. And then you know about it before you've even read the description. And I just feel the new version just doesn't quite do that for me.
It does take some of the ethereal quality out of it.
Yeah, it makes it more of just like, oh, it's a really beefed up panther.
It's a big cat. Yeah, it's a big cat with tentacle whips. Cool.
Still looks freaking cool, though. I mean,
oh yeah, the design is vastly improved.
Is this one of your favorite D&D designs, Morganite? Like, is this up there?
I mean, I haven't really sat down and looked at the various creatures, but the ones that we've encountered so far, both on this podcast and largely in our game, I'd have to say, yeah, I think it was the design that I really enjoyed a lot. There's been a couple others, but Mamba asks, is the displacing ability a genetic thing or like an invocation?
Oh, it's genetic.
It's genetic.
Yeah.
The skin is actually highly prized for making displacer cloaks.
Right. Right.
Which that's interesting. So it's a conscious vibration that happens nonstop. It's described as stopping when they die, but when they die, you can skin them, and then the material, then like their skin retains the property.
That is a question.
I feel like
it seems like there's a disconnect there.
it's probably the sort of thing that if you're just a ranger out and you manage to take down a displacer beast and skin it, you've got a really cool, messed up looking rug. If you've got a wizard handy, maybe they do something to kind of activate preserve or activate whatever's going on within the skin.
Something extra has to be happening because it's not the skin alone, because it does stop when the creature dies.
There is literally a line in the ecology of the in Dragon 109 where it says it is still, and remember this is written in character, so I'll do a voice. Here we go. It is still unknown, even to me, precisely how the light rays are deflected by the vibrations. Due to the beast's magical nature, I would not be at all surprised if the supernatural had a fair hand in the origin of the talent. And it does point out that displacer beasts are able to see each other's true forms and are not deceived by displacing.
Yeah.
So we know magic's in play here, and I think Tyler's probably got the right of it, is a wizard can, say you have this cloak, this skin, and it talks about how all this happens at the molecular level, right? The cells vibrate. Those cells are dead, but a wizard's like, pump some energy into them. Those cells are and do their thing, and suddenly you got a displacer cloak.
Yeah.
Also,
enchantment.
If in your adventures you happen to get a displacer cloak, yeah, they're super useful, but a blink dog will absolutely try to tear you the fuck up.
Yeah,
because
which lends credence to the fact that they don't like the effect.
Yeah, that it's in ecology. It says his running theory is that that the displacement messes with the nervous system of the blink dog, and the teleportation messes with the nervous system. Like they're basically just two effects that are so jarring that they
So polar magnets essentially.
Yeah.
But we again have to say that in 5th edition, they did add in this thing that literally says running and breeding freely in the Feywild. The displacer beasts soon came to the attention of the Seelie Court, which is the enemies of the Unseelie Court, who created the displacer beasts. With blink dog companions at their side, the Fey hunters drove these predators to the fringes of the Feywild, where many crossed over to the material plane. And to this day, displacer beasts and blink dogs attack each other on sight. So, not only were the Seelie responsible for putting displacer beasts in our world, thank you, the Seelie, but also this gives an in-world reason why the blink dogs hated them. The two don't count each other out, though. I mean, blink dogs could have already hated this effect and just been the perfect hunting animals for them.
Generations of slaughter have led them to have a genetic distaste for the...
No, I think it's literally their abilities. The blink dog has a teleporting ability that upsets the displacer beast.
Yeah.
And the displacer beast's displacing ability definitely aggravates the dogs.
I like Tyler earlier on. You were talking about sort of like the scientific research that was done in the wizards journals and whatnot.
It was of
ridiculous.
The two articles that I've read, I read the ecology on the unicorn and I read the ecology of the displacer beast. By the way, people, Dragon is great. Feel free to go look at the old PDFs. They've continued it as Dragon Plus. It's a great resource for neat character ideas, learning about the world, monsters. I loved the approach of the Displacer Beast one because it's very much like this professor goes out in the wild, explains how he captures his subjects. Like,
I mean, and the way he does his experiments is like, I threw a blanket over one of them. And
yes,
watched what happened.
I cast Cone of Silence.
He does, yeah. Cast silence at one point. Yeah. He's like, I just love that his tools are like all powerful magic and a blanket.
Yeah.
That's good.
Like, of course it would. If you're a science magic guy, you're going to use your science is going to be very low and your magic is going to be very high. So Morganite, do you have more questions about the Displacer Beast?
Well, I suppose I should dip into the standing tradition we've had on this podcast so far and ask questions regarding to territory, mating, and yeah. What do Displacer Beast babies look like? Do we have any pictures of those?
Well, I actually do have a baby picture. I have a baby picture.
Baby pictures.
Ready? It's cute.
Oh my god!
It's like
It's cute but not accurate. This picture shows the tentacles on the back of this little tiny kitten. This is more of like a kitten displacer or something.
It's true. It's true. It shouldn't have. This is amazing. We're at that level of nerdism. I love it. It should not have the tentacles.
Yeah, it should have little horny nubbins.
That said, it's adorable.
Yeah, it is adorable. True.
And yeah, this is all gone into in the ecology of the Displacer Beast, actually.
Yeah, there's a lot of details for the mating rituals and everything. They mate similar to cats.
Not surprising.
They mate in autumn and bear in the springtime.
They use the tentacles to slap the ass of the other cat as they go.
Dude.
Oh, John.
Well, actually, they do talk about during their mating ritual, just not to get too whatever, but they're the points, the thorns will retract. The claws will retract from their tentacles so that when they do their little slappy slap during mating, it doesn't
I'm not
actually cause
joking.
wounds. Yeah,
I know it's funny, but I'm not joking.
Yeah, I know that's part of their their ritual. Is like a little bit of a tentacle, soft tentacle slap.
Yeah, they're young.
The more you know.
They're young or born with. I thought this was interesting. They're young or born with their eyes open and with a full set of teeth, without the tentacles. So they eat meat immediately upon birth, but they still nurse.
Okay, like how long? Well, I mean, cats nurse for a while too. So, but how long are they with the parents before they're booted out?
Well, it takes 4 months for their tentacles to grow, and it takes about 2 full years for them to reach total maturity. But I want to say,
they said they're able to hunt on
and
their
about
own
the
by
time that
6
they're
months.
able to. They're not allowed out of the cave or lair until they can displace properly. And then basically once their tentacles are grown and they can hunt on their own, the family unit splits up.
So it's not a permanent mating. It's specifically for breeding purposes.
It's specifically for the breeding purposes. And then everybody finds their own pack until the breeding season happens again.
And it's interesting because they do say like the family can relocate as a group sometimes. Like that's not unknown.
Yeah, if they're
not unheard of.
Yeah, well, if they're forced out of their den or something while they're still raising
you kind of get the sense from reading this that the idea was much like cats, if sticking together creates a better survival rate for them, they will stick together. They have that instinct. And I think 5th edition, to get back to design a little bit, 5th edition encourages DMs to use hordes of monsters rather than single monsters. And the lore of a lot of the creatures kind of was changed to encourage this. So they talk about the Displacer Beasts used to be pack, like animal hunters. Like they would use them as packs of hunting Displacer Beasts. So you kind of get this idea of like, okay, in the lore, it would make sense to have them attack together.
Mm-hmm.
Mamba asks, can they be tamed? The answer is yes. Tamed but not domesticated. They 5th edition says, traditionally they were tamed by the unseelie. And older editions, when the origins were still mysterious, people thought perhaps evil mages had created them specifically for use as dungeon guards.
And in fact, one of the earliest appearances of the Displacer Beasts in a campaign, it might be the first appearance of them in a campaign, is the Vault of the Drow. The Drow have them as pet guards, like one of the main Drow villains. It's like it's a brother and a sister pair or a twin. I can't remember, but anyways, they use them as like and it's such a cool image because like you think about it, it's instantly like, oh, there's the villain as he comes down. This drow slender elf creature comes down from his palace, flanked by 2 Displacer Beasts running a hand along the head.
That is your ultimate like Bond villain style villain.
Yep.
Entrance.
It's one of the. I was at a convention once. And this is totally a secondhand story, so I can't verify its truth, but it'd be really cool if it's true. I was at a convention and I was with a guy who he was on a panel. He was a comic book writer, and he had gone to a panel with Dan Aykroyd. And Dan, he said that he'd talked to Dan Aykroyd, and Aykroyd had said that he got the idea for the Ghostbusters scene where she has the two dogs at her side from the Vault of the Drow adventure. Again, I don't have a way to verify this and say if it's true. Dan Aykroyd, if you're listening, maybe write in and tell us on our next Twitch whether or not that's true.
Yeah, can we get a confirm, Mr. Aykroyd?
But I would love that if that's true.
Yeah, that's great.
And I will say that's the image that I get when I think of that drow, is like kind of the not dogs obviously, but the running the hand along this black sleek creature.
Any other questions, Morganite?
Not particularly. I feel like I was more curious about kind of their origins and how they came into being and that kind of thing. But I guess as a DM, how would you suggest other DMs bring the Displacer Beast into their campaigns? Like, what would you see as good ways to do? Ours was a bit unique, but how would you suggest that they brought him on board?
Well, I'll give my answer and then I'll ask a question of the group too. But the cool thing about the Displacer Beasts is they're so easy to use. I mean, they incorporate so many different aspects of, I mean, you can use them for a horror genre, you can use them for a high fantasy genre. I personally love them as a kind of a pet of a villain. There is a great adventure called, it's in Dungeon 36, and it is called get ready for this. This was done on purpose. It's called Ass Flags, Unintentional Emporium. And basically, it's supposed to be a bit of a goofy adventure. But the wizard Ass Flag, he goes missing. And Ass Flag has kept a bunch of beasts, and amongst them are Displacer Beasts. And when he goes missing, they get hungry. And they go out into the town that his wizard's tower is around and start murdering like dogs and cats and donkeys and then people. And I kind of love that use of them. Like, it's like this creature run amok amongst the city. You know, it's like you can't really tame the nature of these beasts. And when you do, it leads to bad things. So I kind of love that. I love the idea of them as like the untamable pet. But my question would be, as players, like Kayvon, how would you love to see a Displacer Beast? No pun intended.
Yeah, I feel like that's either you're hunting, you're going through the jungle and there's something stalking you, and then it becomes sort of like an Aliens, like there's a mysterious monster that you don't know where it is, but it's slowly picking off the stragglers. That kind of fear, I think, would be a great use in the campaign, but also, yeah, as like a sub boss effectively to a larger villain, like a pet, or
he's got the pet.
Something that gets you primed for a larger battle. And probably depletes much of your resources in the process.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Or he kind of like leaves his pets to deal with you while he turns around and ignores you walking back into his tower, you know. That's awesome. What about you, Tyler?
I kind of same as Kayvon. I like the idea of when you're a low level campaign, just like that kind of shows you how far you are from civilization. You've gotten from civilization. All of a sudden you're being stalked by Displacer Beasts. They're such a good utility creature. I could see enjoying an encounter with them anywhere, like the boss, the sub boss, just like a guardian in a room in a dungeon, as kind of a trap. Like, oh, we've got a treasure room. Psych, you have Displacer Beasts.
That'd be interesting. A dungeon where like the beast has been let loose to basically just like scrounge on rats and anything that might invade. So it's not necessarily where I'd prefer to be, but it's been sort of trapped.
It would not be a healthy looking
picks
cat.
off intruders.
Yeah,
probably looks a lot like the
emaciated
third edition. Yeah.
They talk about them not having to eat for a few weeks, but then gorging when they get a chance. So they definitely can go a little while without a meal. There was a great image. I'd hate to not bring it up. That came up when I was reading about these creatures. There was when they run, they only run with their back four legs. so that they're oftentimes their front paws are sort of raised up, and they look like it was described as a feline centaur, which was I don't know, just I can imagine that being an absolutely amazing image of just this like Displacer Beast centaur running at you through the woods
with its claws up,
its
like
claws
2
out,
hands
exactly,
ready to
yeah.
go.
That would be pretty terrifying.
All right.
Does anyone else have anything they want to share before any tidbits or facts that they ran across?
One last trivia bit.
I wanted to. I have a bit of trivia. I also wanted to make sure Mamba's question got answered. Are there any animals or people that Displacer Beasts can get along with? Not specifically mentioned. I mean, obviously, evil people searching for power can tame them, but they're never going to really. Displacer Beasts, their fundamental nature is hatred for all other things that aren't Displacer Beasts. So they're not really a get along with creature.
Yeah, I think it says that they'll kill everything else.
Yeah.
That they just have no. It doesn't mean that the lands around their domains are barren, but they're not going to abide anything else. Like they're not going to buddy up with anything.
Yeah,
and that goes to say they're not cats. It's not like, I mean, obviously the funny thing about Blink Dogs and Displacer Beasts is cats versus dogs. Like that was where it came from, design wise. But the truth is they're not. It's in the real world. They even mentioned this in the ecology article. Cats and dogs can get along. You know, some cats are friends with birds. Some cats, hang out with mice. I mean, you see videos of this on YouTube, but like, you won't see a video on YouTube of a Displacer Beast hanging out with a mouse.
Definitely will not.
No, definitely won't.
No.
I can say that.
Or a Blink Dog.
Yeah.
The piece of trivia I really liked was that among the ways that their body parts are used, the eyes continue glowing after death and are prized as good luck charms for thieves.
Oh, I want a Displacer Beast eye.
Right. As soon as I read that, I was like, my next rogue is gonna want Displacer Beast eyes.
Oh, that's
Like
so amazing, like an amulet or something. Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh man. Stalker just asked, do they ever use their tentacles for anything other than combat and sex? With a side note of, I feel dirty asking this.
I mean, what else is there in life?
Yeah.
Yeah. Question about their tentacles. They're not all. It's all just like sharp thorns and piercy.
Yeah. If you look at the original image of here, I'll pull it back up. The original image really illustrates this well. It's a black and white. It's the very first drawing of a Displacer Beast. And it's in the first edition Monster Manual. And it's got these literally just spikes.
So is the thought that they're like fingernails, or like claws or teeth?
Oh, it's probably either like teeth or claw material.
Yeah. They do specifically mention that a way that a skilled tracker would know that they've come upon a lair of a Displacer Beast is that they sharpen their claws and tentacle thorns against rocks. So you would see
if you're that would be what you would see first if you're hunting for him or looking for him.
Yes. Interestingly enough, the Quirrell in Black Destroyer, the tentacles had suction cups because that's how it fed on your phosphorus.
Oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting distinction.
Yeah,
I feel like that might have been they chose to go with the spiny protrusions rather than suction cups to
avoid copyright infringement or
yeah.
That's different enough. That's different enough.
That leads me to maybe my last bit of trivia, which is there is you're right about the copyright infringement. They actually there's only been one actual official granted use of the Quirrell from the book, and that was in Pathfinder. They use it for one of their adventure modules, and they actually had to ask permission from whoever owns the rights to that to get the creature officially sanctioned for use this one time use.
That makes sense because even just making something similar, the guy's going to get $500,000 off you.
but somehow I don't think he ever sued Dungeons and Dragons or TSR.
I couldn't find anything. The big lawsuit seems to be the alien one.
I wonder if like just a couple of drow showed up at his house and were just like, don't talk about the Displacer Beast. Go sue the alien guys instead.
Now, in your imagination, are these actual drow or are these people dressed as drow?
It's HR Geiger. He was sent by the alien people, but he got the product wrong.
Oh, he mixed them up.
Yeah.
So as far as when we're on the topic of like copyright and trademark and whatnot, I believe in our earlier discussion of owlbears, you were saying that they never trademarked the owlbear, right? Yeah. So the Displacer Beast is, I believe, it's currently owned by Wizards.
Yes,
right?
I do believe. Well,
I believe it is.
The easiest answer is I can just quickly look up Pathfinder Displacer Beast, and if it's in Pathfinder, it is not, because they took everything that wasn't like tied down, like everything that wasn't literally locked down.
Why no Displacer Beast or Beholders?
And yep, so it's copyrighted.
Yeah,
that's it right there. It's copyrighted. Didn't stop them from coming up with an extremely similar creature. I think they called it the Commodon, if this is the one I think it is, which is described as a large leopard-like cat with emerald green eyes, and from its shoulders sprout 6 long serpents, blackish green in color.
Yep.
Yeah.
I see the similarity.
It literally even says, may somehow be related to the Displacer Beast.
Wow. That's a little cheeky. That's
Somehow.
All right.
But I don't actually know if that's an official one. There's a lot of fan creatures too that came into, because it was open source. So don't quote me. If you're a Pathfinder lover, don't at me. Don't at me.
All right. Well,
I think it just goes to show how much people love this creature.
Agreed. And on that note, I think we are going to be wrapping up our episode here, unless anyone has something else to say specifically. Do we know which monster we're going to be talking about next?
I was actually said we could figure that out right now, because I have one in mind, but I'm open to somebody else.
What do you have in mind?
Out. I was thinking we could do the giant spider next.
It's a pretty classic monster.
Pretty classic. And I hate spiders, so it'd be a good one for me.
All I know about giant
less
spiders is that they're spiders but bigger. So is there enough there with the giant
there's
spider?
There's tons with the giant spider.
Well, maybe I'll learn something that episode.
I mean, even if all we're talking about is the spiders, but I think there's way more than that. I mean, you have the god of spiders, the goddess of spiders to talk about, the demoness, the drow, the many layers of giant. There's so much to go into.
Sounds like we have our next monster. I'll post a link down to all of our socials down below. Also, you can find us at alignmentmayvary.com. Find links to all of our stuff there. This episode, along with all of our previous Bestiary podcasts, will be up on our website. You can download them here and other podcast downloading locations. I am so good with this. But yeah, so we'll be back soon. I'm very excited. It's usually about every other week we do this, but it does rotate day to day. So yeah, do keep an eye on our socials. We will update as soon as we have a specific time. Otherwise, thanks so much for hanging out, everybody, for throwing us your questions and for listening. We love having you. And Kayvon, Jonathan, Tyler, as always, thank you for joining us for this lovely discussion.
We'll catch everybody next time.
Have a good one.